Let's roll.
Yeah, like, how do you justify your beliefs? So knowledge is justified true belief. So how can you be justified in believing things to be true? In your worldview, what justifies your beliefs?
Well, I'd say what justifies my beliefs. I have a pretty... So I think what you're getting at is like, how do I know I'm not in the Matrix or something like that?
Yeah. How do you know?
Maybe I can't prove it.
Okay, so then you've given up knowledge.
But I consistently get... experience in my head, sense experience, that tells me that there is a world outside of my own experience.
Yeah, so you're putting faith in limited consciousness for truth. That's what you're doing, right? You don't have all knowledge, right? You don't know everything about everything, right?
No, I do not.
Okay, so don't trust.
Extremely arrogant.
What we're saying is, we're not trusting in only limited consciousness for truth. We're trusting in what's revealed to our limited consciousness by somebody who has all knowledge, who knows everything, who reveals to us the facts about reality. And if that didn't happen, we wouldn't be able to be justified in believing things to be true, because we could always be wrong, because there could always be something we don't know that could invalidate everything we think we know, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so we need to put our faith in the Bible, which is God's revelation to us concerning the true nature of reality.
I don't see how, but you can't escape your own mind and the limitations of your own mind.
Well, you can't know that a mind exists unless God reveals to us that He created minds.
My mind exists.
Well, what is a mind? Can you define what mind is?
Something that thinks.
Well, how do you know that thinking happens?
Descartes, for example, remember, I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
What he was saying is, it was a short way of saying an argument. If I think, then I exist. I think, therefore I exist.
Yeah, the problem is...
whatever I am, even if I'm a brain in a vat or in the Matrix or actually here in the physical world, I exist.
Well, what is I? He's using a singular pronoun to refer to himself, but he can't do that. He's using language, but he's not justified in using that language because that's a singular pronoun, and maybe the perceptions of his consciousness are actually coming from different entities, so maybe he should be saying we, but he can't know. So even as he makes that statement, I think, therefore I exist, he's making an unjustified statement.
I wish that was true.
So you see what I'm saying? So he's using language. He's actually putting faith in the belief that a singular entity exists to do the thinking. But we don't know that. Maybe the thoughts are coming from different entities. Maybe there's a bunch of different entities. Is there one entity or many different ones? How do you know?
Still exists. I mean, like Descartes, he addressed that exact thing, saying, well, maybe there are only two things in existence, myself and an evil demon trying to...
Well, what's myself? How do you know what myself is? What does that consist of?
My mind, my thoughts.
Well, what is a mind?
You're asking, there comes a certain point where you have to use a word to describe something you're experiencing and leave it at that.
Well,
my own mind, I can't define it.
The thing is, you're using language, you're using singular pronouns to refer to yourself, but you're not justified in doing that because the different parts of your consciousness could belong to different entities, right? So maybe there's an entity over here that's having a certain thought in your mind, what you think is one mind, and then the next thought that you have actually belongs to a different entity in a different place. And maybe it's just a giant succession of different thoughts, different mental concepts, and images, and maybe those belong to different entities. But how do you know? You're assuming that there's one thing that's having this stream of consciousness. But how can you prove that?
Prove it to you?
Yeah, how can you prove that? How can you justify using language in your worldview?
I'm sitting here with somebody who doesn't understand reasoning.
You can't.
So how am I going to explain reasoning?
Because you're putting blind faith in the belief that there's a singular entity to communicate with.
Okay, well, I believe it's self-evident that I am a singular entity.
Okay, well, that's an unjustified belief. Like I just explained to you, how do you know that the different perceptions of your consciousness don't belong to different entities? How do you know it's not we? Maybe you should be saying we.
Because I'm having a singular experience.
Well, you don't know that because each... No, do you believe in the concept of time? Like time is passing?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you, maybe each segment of time that you're experiencing belongs to a different entity, right? So maybe not each second belongs to a different entity. Each stream of consciousness in each second, maybe that belongs to a different entity, right?
That's entirely possible.
And so maybe the sign right here that exists in your conscious perception, maybe that belongs to an entity. And then maybe the bushes in your consciousness, maybe that belongs to somebody else's mind, like a different mind. So there's a bunch of minds that come together to create this experience, but how can you be justified in saying I when it could be we creating that experience?
Okay, let's assume that's the case. How does that prove that God exists?
Well, I'm saying let's not put faith in limited consciousness. That's what you're doing. You're putting faith in limited consciousness to be justified in your beliefs. And I'm saying you can't be justified in believing those things about reality. Like, you're not justified in believing that one entity exists without revelation from God, that he created human beings on planet Earth to communicate with each other and carry out a dominion mandate and to have communion with him. So like the Bible indicates to us that he created different entities who can communicate with each other. But if you don't have the revelation from the all-knowing being that happens, then you can't be justified in believing that's the actual nature of reality, right?
How do I know it's a genuine revelation? How do I know that I'm not schizophrenic and there is no revelation? My mind is just spewing out garbage.
Because if it wasn't a genuine revelation, you wouldn't be able to know anything. It is the foundation for knowledge. It's the precondition for intelligibility. So that's why it must be true. This is a transcendental argument. The proof that God exists is that without God, you could not prove anything. If he has not revealed to us the true nature of reality, you can't know. You can't have evidence for anything, because it could all be illusory. Because you're trusting in limited consciousness for truth instead of unlimited consciousness.
So I cut my parents' laws.
I don't see how this proves that God exists.
Well, like, how can you be justified in beliefs? Knowledge is justified, true belief.
Even if I'm not
You have to have that unlimited
anything
consciousness
is
to tell you.
unknowable to me. I mean, okay, maybe that's the case. Maybe everything is absolute and utter shit. Can't know anything. How does that prove God exists?
Again, everybody's operating on faith. Everybody's operating on faith. So you're operating on faith. I'm operating on faith. You're believing that the perceptions of your consciousness are a certain thing. You're trusting in your own interpretation of like these perceptions, but like you don't know everything. So you could always be wrong about what you think about your consciousness and what's actually happening. So you shouldn't trust in that. You shouldn't trust in that. You should trust in a worldview in which there is revelation from Yahweh, who knows everything, who knows all the facts and gives us the facts. And he doesn't lie.
Why not from the Islamic Allah?
Because he doesn't exist.
Convenient.
Well, yeah, that's what everybody's appealing to, a highest authority. Okay,
Yeah.
So your highest authority is your own mind, but that's not a good highest authority because you could always be wrong. But my highest authority is the one who has all knowledge, who reveals to me the true nature of reality. And my God says that Allah doesn't exist. He's my highest authority, so I must trust in him. And as soon as I give up my highest authority, I can't even be justified in believing that you exist to communicate with. So I'm always operating according to my highest authority.
Well, if we're both operating entirely upon faith, then I think we're in the same boat.
Right, everybody's operating on faith. You have to operate on faith. That's why knowledge is justified true belief. You need to believe things in order to know them.
Getty or counterexamples.
What about it? Can you give me that? Can you give me an example that would disprove that?
That's a side note. Yeah, JTB usually holds true.
Yeah, I would describe. I don't know what other definition of knowledge you could possibly have.
A philosopher named Getty, or back in the 60s or 70s, wrote a 3-page essay that effectively blew the JTV argument out of the water.
Well, that's people's opinion. I'd like to. I haven't read that yet, but I'm aware of it. But
yeah, it's a good read.
Yeah.
So, well, I think we've come to an impasse. But
well, it's not an impasse. Like, it's not an impasse. Like, you need to put faith in a worldview that actually justifies your beliefs. Like, it doesn't make any sense to put faith in limited consciousness. That worldview doesn't make sense of reality. That doesn't provide preconditions for intelligibility. You need a worldview in which there is revelation from unlimited consciousness, because you couldn't have knowledge unless there was.
And there was just a, I said in a speech a few years ago that parents like that,
this is a transcendental argument, man.
Anything in the world that you want to be.